on the 1969 Camaro in this video. Those of you guys that remember the last video on this car, we basically got the complete drivetrain in, a bunch of stuff painted, coils, ignition, everything done. Motor looks awesome. Most of the mechanical stuff is done. So what we need to focus on next is wiring. So I've had a stack of parts, kind of shuffling around this garage all winter and spring, just as cars come in and out. But the one box that I've been moving the most is the one that came in first, and ironically is the wiring portion of this car. It came in January, shortly after I bought the car, because I was afraid of long lead times. We'll get into that a little bit later. But let me show you what parts we're going to be kind of tackling in this video, the main wiring of the car, and put it up on the bench here and you guys can get a closer look. So here are the boxes we got from Holley, as you guys can see, and I think I've mentioned in a couple videos I'm going to be controlling this LS3 with the Holley Terminator X Max. So I have never purchased one of these before. This is kind of my first LS swap vehicle, but everyone says that Holley swap system, specifically the Terminator, is the way to go. Should be completely plug and play. Mostly idiot proof. Most guys don't have enough good things to say about these things. I went with the X Max because I wanted to be able to use a drive-by-wire throttle body, which we have. For those of you guys that are going to be running an automatic transmission, the X Max system also allows you to be able to control that automatic transmission. So this is your full computer, ECU, wiring harness, all that good stuff. I ordered this same time as this back in January. This showed up in about 3 days. This just showed up last week, took 5 months. This is the Holley 12.3-inch Pro Dash. And I'm not sure if we're going to get into it in this video or not, but this is going to be hoping to be somehow retrofitting this into the stock 69 Camaro Dash. Probably going to be a lot of fabrication involved. So like I said, not sure if we get to it in this video or not. We'll take a closer look at this later, but this is going to be our control system right here, dash, ECU, wiring, all that stuff. But let's focus on this first. All right, here's what we got. Holley Terminator X Max. Couple different wiring harnesses here. Here's the actual ECU. Terminator X Max. Got a vacuum port there, as well as obviously various different plugs where these harnesses are going to plug into. Left to right here, this is your transmission harness. So we got a 6-speed manual, so we won't be using that. Might just keep it on the shelf, or maybe I can recoup some of my money selling it to someone who needs it. This is the main harness. So this is what is going to plug into the ECU. Has all your different sensors, TPS, mass airflow, injector coils, you name it. If it's on an LS, it's on this harness here. I believe this is your main power harness, so this is going to supply power to the ECU. This will run directly to the battery. This is an inputs and outputs harness, I believe. So you can run different inputs and outputs to the ECU, for example, a 2-step or nitrous or anything else, reverse lockout solenoid we might have to look into. I haven't even got that far yet, but inputs and outputs, O2 sensor adapter. Here's your injector harness and pigtails. So these will be for your 8 injectors and your Bosch O2 sensor, as well as I think this is your USB cable for tuning. And that's pretty much it. The longest part is going to be running this harness and getting it all plugged in, running power to it. I think the first thing we should do is figure out a place to mount this Terminator X ECU. So I've been digging around in here a little bit, and I've been thinking about this all winter because, I've had the time. This car, as I've mentioned, has vintage air, which runs behind the dash. All this space over here we're going to count as used for now because that's where our cluster is going to go. So basically we have from here over, and a lot of it is taken up by this piping from the vintage air unit, which you can see down there. And this whole area right in here is taken up by the glove box, which I have out right now because I needed to access the screws to get the dash pad off. So kind of actually limited up here. We could make it work if we wanted to with you know, a fancy bracket. To save myself some time, I just tossed in my center console. Actually, I think I didn't film this, but maybe I did, but you guys might have missed it. I cut the hole in the floor for the shifter. So there's our shift hole covered up with painter's tape for the T56 Magnum or TR6060. And this is our custom center console that came in the car. Been sitting all winter, it's dusty, but there is an awful lot of room under here, under these cup holders, under this center console. So I just kind of took this thing, and wouldn't you know, it fits perfect back there. So plenty of room for plugs, everything. You could even go back even farther. So right now I'm kind of leaning towards mounting this thing right here in the center console, you know, and then running the wiring up through here. And then I think what I'd like to do, if you guys remember, we have our drive-by-wire pedal down there, but there's still a hole in the firewall from where the original mechanical linkage gas pedal went through. So I'd like to use that existing hole to run these wires through. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So first step here, I think we'd like to mount the ECU, get that solidified. Then I think we can run the main harness and the power harness through the firewall and hopefully start getting some of these connections done. So yeah, let's do less talk, more work, start getting this harness run, ECU mounted, and start getting this car wired. Alright guys, making some progress here. Come on inside the car. So, got the Terminator X ECU mounted securely using my favorite new tool, the Riv Nut tool you saw in a previous video. So this is mounted kind of crooked. It kind of follows the shape of the center console. It gives me plenty of room to plug in our connections, which we have run the main harness as well as the power harness through the hole in the firewall where the gas pedal used to be. I did have to enlarge it a decent amount with the Dremel. You can see my gas pedal bracket here. Had to remove the pedal. We were able to make the hole big enough to get these wires through. So now I just need to source a grommet so we can seal that up and make the edges, you know, a little bit smoother. But all the wiring is through. So here is the main harness right here. This will plug in right there. And here's the power harness, the main power harness. These positive and negative plugs in right here. connects directly to the battery. Some of these other wires are gonna need to be wired to a switched power source off the ignition, which is somewhere in here. We'll have to figure that out or look at my old video somewhere, or maybe I labeled it if I was smart. Probably not. Same thing up here. Some of these are for output signals, tact signals, etc. But at least one of these needs to go directly to the battery, one of these needs to go to a switched power source, but all that's covered in the manual. So yeah, these are ready to go. We're gonna have to tuck these up in here somehow. Obviously we've got some extra wire here, but these are ready to go inside. On the outside, we've got all of our connectors here. So these are all labeled from Holley, as you guys saw earlier in the video: NOx sensors, wideband O2, IAC, idle air control. You guys know all these sensors, familiar with all these on any LS motor. So now it's just a plug and play operation, running these nice and clean, making sure they're going to the right spot. Oil pressure, this is a ground for the back of the cylinder head. So yeah, basically we just got to take all these, plug them into the right spot. All the sensors are in the motor, so we should be good to go there. Here's our injector harness, plugs in right here, and then all 8 injectors run in there. So this will basically drape over onto each side. They're again labeled even, odd, so you know which bank they're going on. The only thing is I'm going to order some more of this wire sleeve here. I don't like how these are exposed here. They're all different colors, kind of clashes. So we'll order some of this. We'll clean all that up. Obviously we can do that later. Also ran the power wire behind the firewall, or behind the intake manifold on the firewall, back through here, and this is where we can connect it to the battery. Car came with these janky Walmart terminals when I bought it. So a little while back I bought these nice terminals that have plenty of screw terminals so that we can hook up power for our ECU, the existing connections here for the vintage air and the sound system, all nice and clean. More or less our wires are where they need to be. Now we just need to hook them all up, make connections, just start plugging stuff in. So yeah, let's start plugging some of these sensors in, running wires where they need to go, making these connections. I'll check in with you guys in a little bit. Well, I did it again. Over a month since I last recorded anything on the 69. I apologize for that, but we've been full steam ahead on our Gen 1 CTSV project. which is now done and looking awesome. So if you haven't already seen that video series, I'll link it up here. But that's done. So I'm ready to get back on the 69. I believe where I left you guys, we were just kind of starting to plug in the Terminator harness. I got it run through the firewall, and I was just basically plugging stuff in. So here's where we're at. So injector harness is plugged in, coil harness is plugged in, down to our relocated coils. I think I was telling you guys about all these sensors that would go to a Gen 3 throttle body. We're not going to use any of these, so I'm either going to cut these off. I'm just tucking them down for now. But I actually ended up purchasing the correct drive-by wire harness, which runs through the firewall and plugs into the ECU. So Gen 4 throttle bodies only have one single plug right here on the throttle body. So that's plugged in, run through the firewall. Also modified our wiring for a Gen 3. MAT stands for manifold absolute temperature. And your slot style math, one of the wires is going to be your air intake temperature, so that's just as good enough for that. So I looked up the wiring pinout for that, got that wired up temporarily. Same thing with our map sensor. We have our OEM LS3 map, whereas the connector for the LS harness would have been a Gen 1 connector, so I got that wired in as well. All this is temporary. It's ugly. Wires are everywhere. But as a lot of guys do, when you're just trying to make sure that everything is wired correctly, it doesn't make sense to tuck it all in, make it all look nice. If you might have to check something or redo something or whatever it is, we can do that. Just want to make sure everything's wired correctly before we make it look pretty. Got a ton of nice sleeving and conduit here, so we can make everything look really nice when we're ready to get to that point. But just want to make sure everything's wired correctly first. Also, same thing in our oil pressure sensor. The pressure plug on the Holley harness wasn't right for the LS3 style 3-prong oil pressure sensor, so I got that wired into our OEM connector. I just bought from ICT Billet this plug and this plug, like 20 bucks for both of them. Then just a little bit of wiring and we should be good to go. So everything's plugged in up here: cam sensors, crank sensor, knock sensor, coils, injectors. Everything I think is good up here. As you can see, going through the manual, I've checked off everything we've done. Everything is, I think, good to go. So now we're on to loose wires. This is basically where the power is going to come in to the device. So now we need to start getting into the wiring in the 69 Camaro. So let's see, here's our main harness. I believe this is our drive-by wire harness. And this is our drive-by wire harness. This is our main power harness. So all that's going to plug in right here. I've just got it loose in here for now. I believe these right here and these right here are loose wire bundle, which is these right here. So basically we need 12 volt switch to turn the ECU on. Gonna need a solid 12 volt to the battery, our fuel pump relay, which will run back to the fuel pump, chassis ground, and a tack output, which we're not gonna use because we're gonna have a digital dash. So yeah, that's next. I'm gonna get in here with my test light or multimeter. I labeled a lot of these wires as I pulled the old dash out back in January. I thought it might come in handy now, but we're obviously going to check everything with our test light, make sure we got 12 volts where we need it. Yeah, start making some of these connections, and then eventually we'll hook up the laptop, turn the key on, see if we can see the sensors and make sure everything's wired correctly, and we'll go from there. But for now, let's keep plugging away, get some of these loose wire connections done, and we'll go from there. All right, me show you guys where we're at. Starting on the outside, got the battery hooked up for the first time in 6 months, 7 months. This is one of the loose wire connections we had to do that we were just talking about. This is direct to the battery according to the instructions. This is the power harness for the Holley Terminator, so just a positive and a negative. This is my new wire direct down to the starter, which I think I already mentioned. This other red wire here, this brighter one, is new. And I replaced, this used to be the alternator wire in this car. I mean, I don't know very much about, carb vehicles. I've always been a fuel injection guy, but this was the alternator wire. This is probably like, I don't know, 10 gauge wire maybe? What does it say on it? 10 gauge, what a guess. Anyways, I've always had alternator wires that are the same gauge as the starter, which is basically 0 or 1 gauge or 2 gauge, whatever, welding wire. But this was basically running to the alternator. And I don't think this would have done the trick on a fuel injected car. You have a lot more electronics running, the ECU. We're definitely going to have 2 electric fans up here. Just a lot more draw. I don't think that wire would have cut it. So, I loomed this up nice. You're not going to be able to see a lot of it and didn't really film this, but we got a brand new alternator wire run up through here under the radiator support, all loomed, all nice. Cleaned up a lot of wiring over here. This is a whole rat's nest. Reloomed all this, made a nice junction there. Everything's nice and neat, nice and tight. This is loose for now. Just got that tied up, but eventually that's going to run down to the alternator. Here's our alternator trigger wires, which we'll have to get into in a little bit, possibly. Still kind of need to figure out how to wire that, but that's nice. That's pretty much done. Just got to cut this to fit and put a block on the alternator. We've been through all the connections up here, so let's get inside. One more out here. This purple wire, which comes off the, basically comes right out of the firewall. This yellow one's for the power or the window washer fluid, I think. See if we're going to use that or not. But this purple wire is your starter trigger wire. So again, if you guys are doing an LS swap, check out ICT Billet. They make all sorts of pigtails and harnesses and cool stuff. I think I showed on video. This little pigtail here plugs directly into the starter, and it's even the same color as the original GM purple wire. So this will basically, when I turn the key to the start position, it sends 12 volts down through there, which I'll eventually hook up to here. Start the motor. So I think we're good to go there. I've tested this. I have 12 volts here with key forward. Inside, probably said this 100 times this video, probably said 100 times more. This is all temporary. Looks terrible, but just want to have a proof of concept, make sure everything's wired correctly before we make it look nice and neat. Really only had to make 3 connections in here thus far. There's 5 total loose wire connections. Green is for our fuel pump, which we need to wire to the fuel tank in the back. Blue I've tucked up there because we're not using it, as I mentioned. That's your tack. So I really just had to do the red wire that we ran to the battery, which I showed you outside. Black wire, which I connected to a chassis ground in the dash up here where I have some other grounds going to. And this red and white is a switched power source. And it says in the instructions it's important that this needs to have power even when the car is cranking. Some accessories, like sometimes your radio, will lose power when you're cranking. So we used our test light over here right at the ignition and tested that we had power at this wire, which actually ended up being this pink one on the dash, which I actually labeled back in January. Who knew that I would actually help myself out back in January, as 12 volt switched. And I tested it. We have power not only in the on position, but also in the cranking position, because obviously if the ECU doesn't have power when you're cranking, how's the car supposed to start? So very important that this wire has 12 volts even when the car is cranking, which it does. And that's it. All of our connections are plugged in. The one empty slot there is for our transmission harness, which the old 6-speed here we're not going to need. So everything else is in there. Our drive-by wire, all the other ECU connections, and our power harness. Good to go. I've got our laptop, I've got our Terminator X software installed. I've got the Holley CAN bus to USB adapter here, so we can plug this into the PC. First things first, I think I have this all wired, again, temporarily, but it might be difficult for you guys to see, but there's a series of LEDs over there. Let's turn the key on, see if we get power to this, and then maybe even plug it in and see if we can get any of our sensors to read. Oh, saw something flash over here. Look at that. It's hard to tell which lights are on. But yeah, you can see kind of reflecting off the seat there. We definitely have power to the ECU. So let's plug this thing in and see what we get. Classic. It's always a software or firmware update. Let me get this updated. I'll get back with you guys. Finish the software update. Now we're doing the firmware update that it's telling me we need. We'll see what happens. All right, so made a little more progress. Did some research off camera. Got the firmware updated on this. Software is updated. Everything's good to go. Most of the instructions online are for using that 3.5-inch handheld. We're not using that, so I had to kind of figure out how to do this through the Holley software. But basically, again, I'll save you guys the time, but I went through all of these, made sure that everything's right for the LS3, what injectors we're using. You know, we've go over here to sensors, what map sensor we're using, what coolant temp sensor, oil pressure, etc. Went through all this stuff, made sure that everything lines up with what we have. In addition to the base tune that Holley has written, if you guys using this in the future, you go to Open Global File. Holley includes all these base cals. And basically, we come in here, we go to GM, we're LS based. This is the tune that I just saved. But basically, here's where I started. 58X, 58 tooth crank reluctor wheel, which all Gen 4 LSs use, multi-port fuel injection, LS. Started there. And then the rest of the tune is going to be written basically by Holley based on the stuff that you input here. So your injector info, number of cylinders, displacement, fuel system, fuel pressure, etc. So I got my gas pedal here, took it off earlier so we could, or actually I took it off 2 months ago so I could get all that wiring through the firewall. But I think the last thing we have to do is perform what's called a TPS auto set. I'm going to do this and I'm going to have you guys watch from up front, but basically it's going to have us push this thing to the floor twice. And basically it's got to learn where the wide open and idle positions are. So we're going to come in here, going to go to TPS auto set. Yep, okay. All right. Okay, it says TPS auto set successful. How's that looking, fellas? Off, off. So our TPS appears to be working perfectly. Additionally, you can see if I press here, TPS is working. Also now our map sensor is working now that we've specified the correct one. Coolant temp sensor is working. Battery voltage looks good. Oil pressure, we obviously won't know. Fuel pressure is not hooked up because I'm running a return fuel system. The only sensor that's not working is our manifold absolute temperature, or IAT sensor, intake air temp. And I'm not sure if I wired that, 5-wire math correctly into the IAT. I'm probably going to do what I should have done anyways and order a $15 IAT sensor from GM. We'll deal with that later. In the meantime here, everything seems to be communicating perfectly. The drive-by-wire works perfectly. Seems like all the other sensors are working. Obviously, there's still a lot to do here. We have not even touched the fuel system yet, but I'd honestly love to hear this thing crank over. Just see if maybe we can build a little bit of oil pressure, make sure there's no crazy weird noises. So I think I'm going to hook up this purple ignition wire to the starter. We can see if we can get this thing to crank and get some readings on the Holley, maybe do a quick data log. Obviously not going to fire it. There's zero fuel, no cooling, nothing. But I just want to hear this thing crank over. Make sure the cam install that we did 6 months ago is still fine. I'm sure it is. I've done a bunch of them. But yeah, so let me get some oil in this thing, double check some other things, maybe, just go over everything. And then let's see if we can't hear this thing crank over. All right, I think we're ready here. Primed the oil pump via the galley plug on the side of the motor. Disconnected both coils so we don't have spark plugs or wires sparking, because I removed all the spark plug wires so we can get some cranking speed into this thing. Hooked up our starter trigger wire, again, temporarily. What else? Remove the belt just so we don't have accessories spinning when they don't need to. We're not gonna, again, there's no fuel in this thing, nothing's hooked up. I just want to hear it crank over. May or may not build some oil pressure, but let's see. This thing hasn't made any noise at all since what, February when I drove it home from Baltimore. And this Camaro hasn't made any noise since January. Got our gauges hooked up here. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna flick the key. How'd it look out there? Let's take a look. Everything looks all right. Let's check for leaks. I'll get back with you guys. Reading RPM. Not seeing any oil pressure yet. I got about 4 quarts in the motor. Should be enough just to get it primed. But again, oil pressure sensor wiring is still questionable, maybe? All right, let's give this one more shot. Yes. Look at that. 36 pounds just at cranking. Woo! We've got something going here, fellas. All right, so we got some oil pressure. So now we know that when we do start this thing, it's gonna have immediate oil pressure as soon as it fires. So I always like to, even though this is a used motor, I did the same thing with my brand new twin turbo built motor for the Z06. Always good to prime it so that it doesn't, not have oil pressure and you don't end up doing some sort of weird airlock. It's easy enough to just let some oil drain into the galley there. So we know that our high pressure, high volume oil pump is working. We got 36 pounds of pressure, just, in cranking. So we should have excellent oil pressure when it's running. We know that our oil pressure sensor is wired correctly. This is wired correctly. We're gonna get the right sensor for our manifold ambient temperature. Everything is working like it should. I'm psyched. So this is just what I needed to get going on this project. As I mentioned, this thing's been sitting for 2 months while I was working on the CTSV, a little bit on the Corvette here, some other projects here and there. But to hear this thing make some noise, see some data on the computer, know how close you are to hearing this thing fire up. I'm ready to rock and roll on this thing. So definitely got a lot of wiring to clean up, make this stuff all more permanent now that I know that it works, make it all neat, hide as much of it as I can, and just make it a lot more professional. So I'm gonna work on that while you guys are away. Hopefully next time I see you, this thing is gonna be looking a lot better and a lot more neat as far as the wiring is concerned. Lots more to come on this Camaro. It's gonna be running before you know it. It's been a long road for you guys who've been on the channel a while, but it's coming here soon. So that's gonna do it for this video. You guys are not gonna wanna miss the next one. I got a really good feeling this thing's gonna make some real noise, some internal combustion engine noises, not just this electric stuff that we got going on nowadays. So hope you guys are there to see that one. Thank you as always for watching. I always enjoy reading your comments and responding to those, so keep doing that. We'll see you in the next one.